what I think will be a pretty dynamic hour given the background of our panelists. So as Jeff indicated, that we're going to be discussing, which really is my favorite subject, online acquisition and which strategies lead to the best monetization and profitable players. Everything from the entire ecosystem of the clickstream funnel and how you can manipulate that to lead to the best results. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves because they'll do a far better job than I can. And with their introduction, I'd like for them to give sort of a background on their company as well as some of the highlights of what strategies they employ just to provide some framework for the rest of the discussion in terms of the types of products that they publish. Would you like to take that?
Sure. My name is Eric Bethke. I'm currently a general manager at Zynga. I've been in games for about 17, 18 years, had a couple game companies. In 2003, I moved to South Korea to form GoPets. I was really interested in the virtual goods model that was so deeply advanced out there. And then in 2009, I came back and I sold GoPets to Zynga. And now I lead a new products team there.
Min Kim, Vice President of Marketing at Nexon America. I joined Nexon back in 2003, and around 2005-06 I came back to the States to bring the microtransaction business to this side of the world that it really didn't exist before, as the producer for Maple Story, which is kind of one of the best in class for microtransaction gaming. And my responsibility now is marketing, but it was kind of the whole user path. From getting players to come in and playing our games and doing all the different types of operations things. So my background kind of extends into the 360 of how the business operates, but currently I focus on marketing.
My name is Tom Nichols. I'm a video game consultant right now. My career has been about 15 years in the video game space, about 9 of that focused in the online space, working on some MMOs, starting at EA.com and working on some titles including Majestic, which was kind of ahead of its time for those of you who knew that game. And then at Turbine, the head of marketing, launched D&D Online and worked on Lord of the Rings. Also then at LucasArts, managed the online games business unit there, responsible for Star Wars Galaxies and Star Wars The Old Republic.
My name is Anthony Royce. I'm a global brand manager at Sony Online, and joined Laura about 4 years ago. So if I say anything remotely intelligent today, it's because of her. And if I sound like a moron, it's going to be a rough week because we got reviews next week. So it's very unfortunate timing.
Gold stars for Tony.
Yes. Tell her you're impressed afterwards, please. So basically, as a marketing manager, I'm responsible for launching a lot of our online games. But that's kind of when our job starts. And if you look at the different business models in our diverse portfolio, we have free-to-play virtual worlds for teens and tweens. We have free-to-play fantasy MMOs based, the EverQuest 2 franchise. And then we have, your core console gamer titles such as DC Universe Online. So basically, from a marketing perspective, we bring these games to market, and then we look at all the acquisition points. We look at, for those we bring in, if we lose them, how we bring them back. But then, most importantly, when they are in the game, how we retain them, how we monetize them, and how we find the profitable areas of acquisition so that the cost to bring them in is lower than the revenue and the value that we extract out of them. And that's most important in online games because they're growing communities. We need to continually bring new people in, grow the community, and sustain the subscriber base.
Hi, I'm Paul Finn. I'm the CEO of TRIGGERSPOT Inc. And we've been around about 2 years, and we help browser-based MMOs specifically launch and market themselves in the US market and North America in general. We've worked with several different forums and publishers, from IGG to Congregate to Hollywood movie studios like Fox and Disney. And we've also helped them basically with their marketing strategy and specifically user acquisition, depending on the kind of game that they wanted to launch. Before that, I was the COO for a company called Outspark, which is more based on the free-to-play online microtransaction MMO heavy downloadable space. And then before that, I was the GM and CEO for Habbo Hotel. So I launched that in 2005. So that was my background in gaming. Before that, I was in digital media and music.
It's definitely a wealth of knowledge up here. So let's start at the top. You have a product that you're ready to market, and what are some of the first questions you ask yourself when you're ready to start acquisition? Before you spend $1, what level of analysis should you do to set yourself up for success?
I do, actually. I'm going to be philosophical for a second. I've been on panels with some of these folks in the past talking about digital goods and microtransactions. I've been thinking about this. I think the discussion between online games and social games, I think it's kind of mirroring that, in that the virality, is it spam? Do I want to play with my friends? These questions come up between traditional gaming and social gaming, and I think almost your question's too late. The way I think about it now is the virality, the socialness of the game should be built deeply into the game design. This just should be just part of the game design way up early. Just like the same kind of conversations we used to have about, well, what do you sell in these games? You just tack on something at the end, or no? Then it realized you had to build it in the game. I think going forward, whether it's destination sites or Facebook games or whatever, I think we're going to need to build social deeply into the game, and that will give you by far the best ROI on user acquisition.
Does that happen at like the first prototype, or literally from the pitch document?
Now I think about it. I actually think about it almost in the first week. Like, what will be the fundamental new social loops that are going to keep people playing with each other? I just cannot not think about the game in that way anymore.
Min, I know that something that you talk a lot about is how the fundamentals of marketing really are still extremely, sort of at the core of your strategies, and how do those parlay themselves into your online acquisition efforts? And
yeah, I mean, I'm going to take a step back and I guess kind of go to what Eric was talking about in your initial question. And before we spend $1, right now it's become kind of different. Before we spend $1, now we're going into kind of brand exploration and what's the identity for this game and what's the message and the core thread that we want to keep going down on. But when we first launched MapleStory in the States, we didn't have any type of refined strategy when it came to user acquisition. And I think it kind of started with product. We didn't spend a single dollar probably in that first year, but we had explosive growth. And that kind of, I think, talks to the opportunity at the time as well as the product being a very good product. And so a lot of people are now, I think, focusing on the funnel and acquisitions, but the very dangerous thing is that you might be so focused on that, and I think this is why it's important that I've actually gone through the whole journey of being able to operate these games and seeing how they work. You're so focused on trying to drive people in, but you're driving them into a game that actually doesn't monetize or doesn't have the right mechanics to actually do it, and that's really dangerous. So I think understanding that your product is something that can actually generate something is pretty important first.
when do you know that your game isn't monetizing?
When it's not.
I mean, literally, I think we ask ourselves that all the time. How many more people do we need to put through it?
It's dangerous because sometimes people make the mistake of, okay, well, my game's not monetizing, so I have to shut it down. And they think it's just about looking at the game and how fun it is, etc. There's so many different things that apply, like are you getting the right people into your game? And I feel like if the game's good, they will come. But is your payment system and all of that already kind of well integrated as well? So people might make the mistake of, okay, my audience for this game is everybody on Facebook. Well, you know what? Your audience really might be people that are like 13 to the age of 20. And you only have a credit card option. And so now you're running this game, you're like, oh, people really like to play this game, but no one's buying anything. This thing must not work. And it's like, kids only have cash, for example, and there might have been a huge opportunity to monetize where you're not looking at the overall business scheme. And a lot of marketers are often charged with just looking at that beginning portion and saying, I brought in these people, how much money is it generating? And they don't really have good integration with the rest of the stuff that Eric's talking about. And I think you need to be integrated across that whole journey as an organization to be able to figure that out.
So Laura, I just want to say something as far as the original question went, as far as fundamentals. I love fundamentals. I mean, I think that there's a lot of startups that don't think about that because they don't have the budget to do enough research on the target user. And then there's a lot of larger companies that do a lot of research on the target user but aren't necessarily providing them things within the game that will speak to them, right? So, all the usual kind of marketing 101s, if you will, demographic, psychographic, geo-targeting, understanding the competition, competitive products, market size, outreach, growth. How are you going to position this product and then ultimately launch, and then looking at who's going to come in and then really focusing on the funnel right away within the first month. Because month one, you'll get the new users, and then month, 2 to 3, and Eric and Min can speak widely to this. And then month 6, you'll have the community builds, and they're going to want different things than the newbies want, right? So I think launching a game is an interesting process, and utilizing the fundamentals right at the beginning, and into the forecasting, and then seeing how you're trending towards that forecasting is really important.
And I think Tom could speak to this maybe a little bit more because he was working on big brands like LucasArts. When we first, when I start looking at some of the Facebook games and games that are coming out now, a lot of the ads are just they're not like desperate ads, but they're ads that are just kind of right there to say hey, come in and play this game. It might have nothing to do with the game that you're currently launching, like some of the
people are getting too caught up on direct response.
Right, on direct response.
They're losing sight of the value of having a powerful brand and demand and a powerful product. When you talk about the funnel, we could optimize so we're blue in the face, buttons, call-outs, text, bounce rate on the web pages, all that sort of fallout report. But if they have a desire and a demand to play that product, and you grew that community out organically, and you have the virality there, then it makes it much more easier for us as marketers to find cost-efficient ways to bring people in. When you have to start paying for people, if you're free to play, you have your monetization challenges, you need a massive amount of people coming in to recoup that money. But if you can find cost-effective ways to bring people in upfront and have a larger install base, then it makes it that much easier to acquire and to get that ramp up, that hype, and that growth. In direct response, you're paying for those people. And if they're not qualified leads, if they're not good prospects, you're bringing people into an experience or an environment that they might not necessarily want to be in. And of course, you're going to waste money because they have to be a player before they're going to be a payer. And if they don't want to play this game, you can't expect to pull a $20 ARPU out of them.
Well, let's talk about. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with that theme. You have a quality product, quality brand, and I think it'd be great if you had no marketing budget, like Min talked about. If you launched your game with no money at all for 6 or 9 months, holy shit. That game is going to have to be good enough to stand up on its own, that people talk about it and bring people in.
You'll quickly figure out what needs to change about it.
Right. And unfortunately, again, I would say, fortunately, we live in this era with Facebook now, that whether you're a Facebook actual Flash game or not, even if you were a downloadable game, I think there's just gigantic opportunities to leverage that social graph for awareness and virality there. And I would say going forward, somebody who can optimize flows and ad buys and change text and use an AdSense type thing, that's just going to be table stakes. That's junior guy stuff that gets put on the end.
Word of mouth is more powerful than any ad.
Yeah.
Any day.
I was going to add, I think there's two things here. We've talked about understanding the launch acquisition, so knowing the product, knowing your target audience, and doing that analysis, that needs to be done. But I also, you need to realize that acquisition happens over the full lifetime of the product, and that's the one different things with live games. You don't just worry about that at launch. And the customers you acquire when you launch one of these games are going to be very different from customers you acquire 6 months in, a year in, and so the marketing mindset needs to change and evolve over time through the lifetime of the product.
Yeah. That point's exciting too, because you actually may not want to advertise your product when you first launch it, because your product actually might not be good yet. Right. And now we have the advantage of launching things online and measuring things and figure out what's good, what's not good, quietly fix that. Why would you advertise loudly if your product's...
When you know you have a good game, what metrics are you specifically looking at? And when you know that sort of that trajectory has changed and you're ready to spend money?
Engagement.
Yeah. I was going to say, if people are playing it and having a great time and they're not leaving, then you've got a good game.
So you're looking at concurrence, uniques.
Is that DAU? What are the key metrics you guys focus on, DAU over MAU?
We do. Yeah.
We look at concurrency and return and basically number of hours played. It's very important for us.
Yeah. We look at DAU a number of times a week. We think MAU is a little bit of a softer metric. Yeah.
How does that vary by product too? So in terms of setting your expectations, knowing who your demo is, what the product's vision is, how do those vary by demo or even the channel that you're on in terms of what metrics you're looking at and how you know you've got the secret sauce?
I think it varies widely, right? So, run everything from teen products to kind of like more mature browser MMOs, and the user acquisition process around that and the gameplay, the way that you kind of have to appeal as far as messaging goes. Vin talks about a lot as far as messaging and branding around the product, but we end up looking at metrics at the end of the day, and we're so focused on that sometimes we do forget in the sprint cycle and what is best. I mean, you listen to the vocal minority, or when you're putting the sprint cycle together, what are you really focused on? I mean, usually it's 7 to 9 key metrics around the reg funnel, and then you're trying to constantly increase engagement and lifetime. I would say, that's really that's the metric that you look at for your ROI. But at the end of the day, it's like, is your game any good? I mean, and I just had a quick conversation about that at the beginning. But at the end of the day, if your game's not good, then it's a big deal.
I think that's an important point. Set up your key performance indicators up front, so you know what you're trying to target. Right. So you have the two reverse funnels. You have your profitability funnel from your top end acquiring a customer, and then you have your engagement. And then the longer they play, the more engaged they are, the retention efforts, and then the opportunities for monetization. So if you look at those two completely inverse, you got a lot of people at the top of the funnel, and then by the time they get into the game, those 100 is now one person. And so you have one person in your game. How much time is he going to spend? How many friends is he going to bring? And we're all searching for these evangelists, but if you have a good game, they'll bring their friends. And so that whole thing, we need 5 key influencers. We need these evangelists out there. We need to mobilize that community. Well, if the game can do that, if the game is good, and they bring new people in, and you retain them, and they play, then you have a better opportunity to monetize them. And for us, we have all different types of models. We have subscription models, so we look at uniques as it relates to subscription time. In free-to-plays, we look at how many days does it take to monetize a player, how many average days are people playing. I mean, for Facebook games, we've done everything from mobile apps, Facebook games, PlayStation 3 MMOs, to PC free-to-plays for teens, tweens, and EverQuest, which is going on 12 years now. And in each one of those different demos, each one of those business models, every one of those genres, there's different metrics, different KPIs that we have data to look at. We have the unique ability, all of us, by having our own platforms, to know exactly who the customer is, what they're doing, and what they want at any given time. So if you build those KPIs up front, you know what you need to work towards instead of just thinking people want red cloaks. Maybe they don't.
I was going to say, maybe you guys could cite some specific examples. So let's say you have a product that the player base is highly engaged in, and that portion of the funnel is working, but it's not monetizing. What are some of the levers that you specifically have developed, given the metrics, to help push people into the conversion?
One of the things that I worked on when I was at Turbine is the way I think of this is you have 2 funnels. You've got the acquisition funnel to bring people into the game, and then you've got essentially the funnel for the game itself. And the good companies, and we were able to do this at Turbine, are able to connect all those dots so that you look at the customers in the bottom of your game funnel, the customers that are paying you money, that are staying around a long time, that have the high engagement. If you can track them all the way back to how you acquired those customers in your marketing campaigns, and then say, aha, this was the site or the mechanism that I used to acquire these really profitable customers over here. Let's do more of that, or let's try something similar to that. If you can connect those dots, I think you can really drive monetization very efficiently with your marketing.
And then you know what's viral or what's paid too. To your point, I mean, if you're spending $20 to bring someone in and the ARP was 5, and then you look at someone who brought 5 friends in, even if that person didn't spend at your monetization rate, you may be making money off of one person that came in and is playing for free versus spending $20 to acquire someone through an ad.
Yeah, it's like you can't see the attrition on top of the funnel unless you have the best business intelligence. And Aaron can speak to business intelligence because they have Zynga has.
Absolutely, and actually, to Tom's point, connecting those 2 funnels, I know in one of our virtual worlds, Clone Wars Adventures, highly engaged customers, but we needed to continue to push the envelope of monetization, and so at the bottom of that funnel, we took the mini games. It's a game that has maybe 20 mini games, the ones that were proving out to have the highest conversion rates, redesigned the entire landing page, reduced it from displaying all 20 down to the top 4, and literally our conversion increased by 20%.
I think if there's a culture of testing and experimentation, I know that sounds kind of whatever in a startup, but depending on what your budget is and what you can do. I mean, if the mantra from top down is we've got to keep doing this, and it's a organism, it's a living thing. I can't tell you what worked yesterday because it's not going to work today, or a month ago, or a year from now. But I can tell you if I did it just now, and I made the creative and I was able to look at the reg funnel, then I can tell you what users are coming and how they're monetizing, depending on business intelligence. But sometimes you just don't have. There's so many startups that don't build that. I mean, so many people who think that they don't need the metrics, those really granular metrics.
So yeah, sometimes I'm harsher. I think a lot of people actually don't want to know.
Yeah.
Or you don't want to answer the question when they say, how much is it the cost per registration?
Yeah.
I don't want to answer that because I like my budget sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to answer that. Like, I'm having a difficult time answering these questions here because you guys are all probably making games that are very different, so all different classes. So like Eric is an expert in his field on the social gaming side, and he knows what his players are worth, and he knows what their lifetime values are. My games are completely different, and they operate in completely different ways. So, for example, I've got people that have probably paid in MapleStory like 40 months, like 60 months straight. And so it's a completely different lifetime thing, and I measure it in a completely different way.
Yeah, but I like I want to go back to my earlier point about needing other people. Like World of Warcraft, I sometimes think as the first big social game in big numbers, because they have the rock paper scissors mechanic. You need a healer, you need a tank, you need DPS. They made the fundamental game that you need other people, so people would go out and grab their friends and like, come play this game. Oh, you should roll priest. You'll definitely love priest. You like being a good guy. You be a healer for me. You're gonna love that.
You must have been a tank.
Yeah, and then grab another guy. Hey, you be the tank, and I'll do the shitty DPS job. And if games were more thoughtful about how you would play and use other people, then you would get a whole lot more mileage out of virality and social, and you get a lot more free acquisition. Not only would that acquisition come in cheaper, but it would retain better because it's your friend that pulled you in. It's your friend that's going to use you and keep using you. I'm using crass words, but I like to speak bluntly and plainly.
I like that. Paul, you mentioned that what you worked yesterday isn't going to work tomorrow, and there's a lot of ideation at these companies and people coming up with new ways all the time and being extremely innovative. How do you distill those down to the best ideas? What do you want to spend your resources on, and who makes those decisions, and how do you mobilize the employees to actually deliver that output?
Well, Eric can probably speak really good, although he probably can't say anything. Too many people are
Under NDA?
Yeah, under NDA. But, I do believe so strongly in metrics and business intelligence above and on top of the red funnel. Looking at your traffic sources, even the traffic sources on banner ads that are performing better within the same ad network and really tracking where the users are coming from. I mean, how many people are really thinking about that? They got $100,000 budget a month on an MMO, and they've got so many other things to think about as far as, splitting up that funnel, like what Tom said, because that's true. There's the operations funnel, and then there's the user acquisition funnel, and, your marketing people are always throwing new users at the property, but if your game sucks or community's upset about something, there's technical issues. I mean, where's that, not only the ideation, but where's the meetings that have to happen in order to fix those issues, right? So, I'm a much bigger fan of looking at raw data and intelligence way above and beyond the user acquisition funnel, and then doing A/B testing, because you can't really tell where you're. I mean, sometimes I have an example of a registration or a landing page where the thing was under the fold and you couldn't even see it, but it performed much better than something that was so glaringly obvious with good-looking girls and whatever else somebody would do that, and it's very difficult to tell.
Leaves you scratching your head.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of an assumption in this space now, is you have to have the metrics, you have to have the BI systems in place,
Yeah.
you have to have sophisticated A/B testing, otherwise you're just
But
shooting in the dark.
That's funny.
Well, okay.
Still,
Well, we've got to the point now with our paid acquisition that we look not necessarily at, if we have a media plan with 20 different networks or sites on there, we can identify the ARPU from any given site that we had paid placement on, and then the cost per registration. So we could say, oh, we're bringing in hundreds of thousands of people from this network. Great, and so we would optimize against that. But what if they weren't spending? So we now have the level of visibility to look and say, at this rate of return, we can spend this much on this network and this much on this site. And so when you're building out your media plan, you can do an ROI campaign, and you know what you can bring in, know what you want to spend. So it's like equation-based acquisition at some point. you can forecast what you're going to bring back. Having that visibility of the last month's campaign to say, all right, these were the networks that performed, and these were the spenders, so we know we can go back there. Or we can do a retargeting campaign. Bring people in, use your third-party pixel optimization tools, and work with the networks to target the right people and the qualified users. And then you might not have a problem spending $10 on someone for registration if you know they're going to bring in 12.
Yeah.
But sorry, going back to Paul's point, I really want to emphasize it. Like, I actually like to ask a question to the audience. How many people run a live game right now? And how many of you guys use metrics every day on your phone? Did you wake up this morning and look at metrics on your phone? Yeah,
I did. I got 1,000 reports.
Yeah,
Hourly.
Yeah, I mean that's where it's going to have to go. I mean, I have friends of mine that walk up to me and say, "Hey, you're at Zynga for a while. Tell me what can I learn? What ads should I buy?" And I say, "Well, don't think about the ads so much. Maybe you should think about social and virality and metrics." And they're like, "I don't have time for that. I'll do that later. I just want to know how I can spend a bunch of money right now so I can make my game big, and then later I can do that stuff." And I'll tell them the whole thing all over again, and we'll have more beers, and then we'll talk, and we'll have a great time. But they're off to go buy their ads.
So, I mean, if you don't have metrics, I mean, it's obvious that it's irresponsible. But, anecdotally, when we were first marketing our games here in the earlier stages when we actually had money, the first thing you're looking at is acquisition, right? So, like, you're tracking, okay, how many people actually came to my site and how many people actually registered. And you're just basically blindly dumping into different media places based on what you think the cost is for the acquisition. And then you realize, like, oh, my concurrency numbers aren't really going up, which is kind of what we measure it based on. It's like, what's going on here? And then you later find out, like, okay, well, a certain site or a certain ad network or a CPA network is using a certain type of offer to get people to register for your game, but they're not true players of your game. And so you can get gamed like that, and you can easily spend like $200,000, $300,000, and it'll quickly disappear. And you think as a marketer you've done a fantastic job, but essentially what you've gotten is a bunch of bogus registrations, or registrations maybe even in a country that you don't care about that you can't monetize. And so you end up getting screwed. And for us now, it's like when I look at registrations, I actually don't really look so much at the revenues, because I think that a lot of the customers that we get haven't played games like ours before, and I can't measure that effectively on month one because we don't necessarily convert them on month one. Our players play with us for years, and so what I'm looking for when players are coming in is how much they're actually playing. So my measure is the engagement. Like, are they actually enjoying our game? Are they coming back? Are they playing for many, many hours? And then I can actually get them down that other second funnel to monetizing them. But when they first come in, I'm measuring whether they're having a good time.
It's kind of a leading indicator for you for monetization later on, right?
Yeah.
What channels work? Where are the profitable players? And is it channel specific, or is it really your approach?
You're asking me?
Sure.
Okay. Well, the profitable players are playing other games because they know how to play them, and they spent money on them. So if you're using Google, you're going to be able to pinpoint, and most likely when you're looking at your metrics, Google will always look like the most profitable place to go. But the amount of people that you can get from there is kind of limited. And so since we're going for scale now, we're not actually necessarily looking at that as much anymore. We're more, again, interested in people that will play our games and enjoy our games. Like, for example, our game Vindictus. A lot of those players have never played a microtransaction game before. So if we looked at profits on day one, we would have probably missed all those guys.
Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that you've gone more the branded approach. I'm seeing a lot of Vindictus ads on GameSpot and sort of where the core gamers are. Were those proved to be successful, and did that seem like the right strategy?
Yeah, it was the most successful campaign for us. It was the first time we actually heard the words, I can't believe this game is free. Whereas for a lot of our other games that do very, very well, like MapleStory, people see it and go like, oh, I understand why this game is free. This was actually the first time that we saw that. But the reason why we're marketing on sites like GameSpot and the IGNs is not just because the audience is necessarily there just to click through, but it's also so that we can build communities on those sites, which we feel are also very important for the longer tail of people coming in, where we feel like it's kind of earned media, where when my ad dollars aren't on that page, there's still a community there that's kind of active, or if somebody comes to the game space or goes to the forum, that there's somebody there that shows that this game is actually active and there are people in it.
I don't think there's a silver bullet answer to that question. It really varies by the products you're working with, who your target audience is, what brands are. So in my case, I've worked on Dungeons & Dragons Online and had very different successful acquisition metrics compared to Star Wars Galaxies or Star Wars The Old Republic or Clone Wars Adventures for you guys. And some tried and true things about acquisition, like you might think that online ads are going to be the most efficient spend, but when you're dealing with brands like Star Wars, and you've got a television show that's on every single week, and you've got your target market, watching that show, and every single week, you can justify a TV ad for an online game, and that will actually pay off, in many cases, and have a good ARPU for you. So have good acquisition costs. I don't know, does that really happen for Clone Wars?
TV has been our number one driver for free roams and Clone Wars Adventures. It by far delivers the most volume, and we've done everything from the online side. We've done branded mini games on Nickelodeon.com. We've done portal sites through Addicting Games. We've done Milk Rocks campaigns in schools where there were posters and in-game items where you could dress up in a milk carton. I mean, we've done everything on the kids' side, but TV, hands down, delivers the most volume. And we do our cohort analysis, so when we're looking at people that came in during our flights of TV times, we are getting a profit. We are looking at the return there. We're not just spending on TV. We're getting gross numbers, and we're jumping up and down as registrations go up. But registration's just a number at some point, and everyone throws it out there because you could throw out big numbers and get some press, but are you looking at your concurrence? Are you looking at your engagement? And TV, right placement, right time with kids is huge for us.
Yeah, I mean, our marketing mix is, it was really popular in Europe with MMOs, and those are, companies that we've been working with to bring to the U.S., and obviously they don't have the kind of marketing budgets to spend on television, but as, working with bigger clients and studios, I mean, I think looking at your marketing mix, one would say that you could spend, a lot more on performance-based ad networks than you could on old media, but it's good to hear that, things are somewhat shifting, and Nexon's done a lot of stuff, and Zynga's done a lot of stuff with old media as well.
Kind of coming full circle.
Yeah.
How do you determine your budget? Maybe you've launched the product, you have some early metrics and indications of how it's going. What's a good out of the gate one for a free-to-play game?
I'll take a stab at that, but I think you guys need to chime in. You need to very quickly get a sense of what your lifetime value of the customer is, and then look at your acquisition costs and make sure acquisition cost needs to be less than lifetime value. Otherwise, you're not making money. But when you're launching a game, you really don't know what that lifetime value is going to be. So you've got to have comps and industry intelligence. And I'm curious, how somebody like Zynga, for example, would know, or Ben, you guys, how do you know when you launch a brand new game what your monetization, what your lifetime value is going to be in the long run?
This is a very difficult question for me to answer.
You don't even want to answer the word.
Yeah. I got a member of my PR team in the audience making sure I'm careful in answering difficult questions. So the obvious thing is, if you knew the lifetime value of the customer, then you would know how much you could spend in order to be profitable. But there raises even other questions too. Like, if you're a small startup and you're bootstrapping, then it's obviously critically important that you're profitable. But if perhaps you're already a big and successful company like Nexon, you may not necessarily need to be profitable at a certain stage if you wanted to go into a strategic spend or something like that. So answering the question of the budget raises questions of business strategy for me right away.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we've found, too, that going in waves so that you can dial things in along the way has been a very smart use of our funds and has delivered the best ROI year over year.
I think it's also what you're willing to pay. So I mean, like, going back to Eric's point, it's like, what can your business handle, and what's the formula for profitability for your game? And sometimes you don't necessarily have that initially, and so you might want to just start off small. But just because you've got like $10 million doesn't mean that the addressable market for your product is actually can justify a $10 million budget. You could be potentially wasting a boatload of money. And so maybe your budget should actually be $30,000 every month. Because if you were to try to spend the same amount of money, again, this is pretty obvious, but if you were to try to spend $1 million, say, in February, your acquisition cost might be like $25 a person. But you could potentially get people that like $2 a person, but you can't get them in very huge volumes. So you might want to start testing out with a very low cost of acquisition and keep pushing that threshold to see like what's the maximum you can get for the price that makes sense for your business. Yeah,
I still have to go back to friends. The best channel in the world is your friends that are playing games. The ROI on that is just ridiculously better, like 40x or 160x. It's crazy off the charts.
We look at marketing as kind of like creating a new seed where we potentially didn't tap a certain social whatever group, and then they're basically going to go and get their friends, and that really is the best way.
I mean, an interesting point would also be mature communities, like obviously Maple Story or even Pablo where I was working, that you're spending part of your marketing budget maybe on a lot of CRM and keeping those the seasoned players are actually spending money and are actually keeping your business going and happy, right? Like, and you're introducing new things, but you have to publicize those things in the context of the fact that your business is now known, or your property is known, right? And then you've got like the new users that you need to bring in to continue to monetize through the funnel. So it's, that is an interesting conversation as far as how the marketing is, in between the two.
Yeah, we've been focusing boatloads these days, not necessarily on the acquisition, but on the retention side. Because people do get tired of a game and they'll basically go dormant for a little bit. And how do you get those people back? And I think building that in is actually equally important, if not maybe more important, for your business. Because our philosophy is that it's easier to get somebody to pay multiple times than to get a new person to pay. So if you've identified that these are paying customers, then you need to treat them very well and figure out ways to get those people to come back when they actually end up quitting.
That was actually my next question. How do you retarget people that are lost in the funnel, and what are some of the specific strategies you guys have employed that have worked?
Well, I'll mention an example that I did with LucasArts with you guys at Sony with Star Wars Galaxies. The game was 5 years old, kind of had a steady decaying subscriber curve, and the challenge was how to bring people back. And we did a combination of event marketing, new things in the game to bring people back, changes in game mechanics itself that were friendly to people that had tagged out and were coming back, gave them a reason to come back, and then some programs like being able to play free for 30 days, 7 days, whatever it is, to bring those customers back. And that it's an easy message: come on back, all your stuff is there, it's free, a bunch of new stuff going on. And you'd be surprised at how effective it is. But the key there is putting all those things together all at one time. Then you get the multiplier effect.
And that's where meaningful marketing comes into play. I mean, if you're targeted with the approach, if it's a relevant message and you got a compelling offer there, that's how you can win people back. And to Min's point, these are real communities, real friends, real people playing, real hours of, several hours a day. I mean, these EQ people, I don't know oh my gosh, the time they spend in game. They probably do it at work. But there's social ties there. And so if one person leaves every month and that guild gets smaller and smaller, you're losing these retention efforts. I mean, you have these retention tools in place, and those are people. These people will retain their friends for you. And so if one person starts to leave, you're losing some of the power that you have in your community. And that's why we have online games, so you can play with your friends. And if your friends start to leave, and we see that in exit surveys all the time, go from one MMO to the other because they're following their guild around. Or they come back for an update, they play for a couple months, they leave, and then they come back for the next update. So there's a cyclical turnover, but if you can keep a core community going and keep those ties, then they act as recruitment efforts for you.
How do you reach them? Email, is that still effective? Is it more about recruiting a friend or referral programs that create those community ties?
I think it's everything. I mean, whatever you can do to put one more hook in a customer or create another communication channel with that customer is very important. So these days it's wherever the customer is. So if the customer's on YouTube, have a YouTube community, make sure that you're actually creating content for that community to just continuously engage those users, because that could go viral and maybe somebody that might have put out is now forwarded that video and it's like, oh, I'm going to go back and play that game. Facebook is a great way for us because if we can get somebody to subscribe to our Facebook channel, even if they quit, like email, people rarely open that, or they sign up for your service or whatever with a bogus email account that they might never really go back to, that might have their like Papa John's ads or all this other stuff, and they don't necessarily open it. But on Facebook, they're always there. So as long as you're very diligent and careful about the quality of messages that you're putting out on Facebook, that could actually be a very good channel for you.
Yeah, and what's meaningful in terms of reacquiring them? Is it free time, a virtual item? Obviously, it depends on your business model, but what are some of the more effective call to actions?
I think if you're doing a really good job, you know what's relevant to the right person. So for me, it may not be in-game items, but for Tom, it may be in-game items. So if you can segment your offers based on the demand, then you have a better chance at that conversion of reacquiring someone. So if you're not price sensitive, if you give them free time, then it's just money. But if it's a cool content update, if it's packed with some in-game items, it's a limited time offer, you brought some of their friends back as well, then that might be something that's compelling. And so I think if the offer has to be relevant as well, not just targeted, because just because you're targeting a group of inactive people doesn't necessarily mean they all want the same thing, or there's the same reasons they would all come back.
Yeah, I've used email verification campaigns with, because you always have a registered user base and an active user base, and there's huge parity between the two. So if you offer them something compelling to come back and check in again after a while, depending on if you can track how long it's been since the last communication, and it's helpful. But social games and MMOs and destination sites are a little bit different, I'm sure. I mean, the social games company will probably just build another game. Harder was using for it's now or whatever it's going to be. Don't farm, do something else.
I think for successful reactivation, I think you have to go back to thinking about engagement again. All retention is measuring when engagement drops down to zero. So I like to measure engagement much more than I care about retention. So if you could figure out why people are not playing as much, there's something they did not like, it was too tedious, some sort of block. If you could address that, that makes the current people who are playing happier. It also means your new acquisitions that come in will also be happier. And it also is kind of like the source of what you could do to go back to the people to reactivate and said, hey, we fixed that screwed up piece, come back. And then you can wrap it around some sort of like narrative content update, like, oh, now we have Attack of the Pink Elephants, and now mice are 5 times stronger, or whatever it is in your game. And people are like, great, that's great, because my mice used to suck, so now I'm back. So it could be like faster energy to get over some hump or more level experience, but I think you have to look deep into your game and figure out what caused them not to be there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we have a really good example at Nexon about that right now, that everybody's kind of jumping on the bandwagon in Korea currently with what we did with MapleStory for our update, which was called the Big Bang. And they did it last summer, and the game had been out, I think, from around 2003, 2004. So the game had been out around 7 years plus. And basically what happened last summer was that MapleStory broke South Korea's concurrency record for a game that's that old. But what that means is that they've also had so many players that have played that game and potentially gone dormant. And effectively what they did was they fixed everything that was wrong with the game. They made the game way easier to play. They made the leveling way faster because they had so much content that wasn't really an issue anymore. And they didn't do what everybody else was doing, which was adding a new boss, or like adding more maps and more maps and more maps, kind of like spreading people across. They just went back and made the game way better. And effectively what that did was they brought a lot of people back, which is the ultimate content. It's like, all my friends are now back playing MapleStory. I've got to go back and play that too. And essentially we did get everybody back to play that game.
And you'll hear all these people, on the forums being very vocal about that they want more. But through all of our surveys that we run every month for our live customers, what they want out of game updates, ranked number 1, they want fixes to the game. Above and beyond new raid bosses, some of that stuff. So if you're thinking about you just got to keep adding more stuff to the game to extend it, it's not necessarily the case. If you listen to your players, if you have any of those sort of tools where you can have those conversations or gather that sort of information, then it'd be interesting to find out that bugs, class balance, those sort of things, because they affect retention. They're there to play your game. It's all about that experience and how can we enhance that experience. And so if there's problems with that experience, and if you address that, then you don't need to buy new customers. You can keep the ones that you have.
So clearly it's all about metrics. And my final question for you is, what piece of technology do you wish you had? What's still missing as part of that BI process, and where do you think it's going?
One of the things that I've seen, obviously there's a lot of companies with very sophisticated BI systems, including, Oracle systems and a company called MicroStrategy that provides a lot of back-end systems, and I know EA works with them. One of the interesting technologies that coming into play there is some text and language processing technology, where you can actually use this technology to get a better pulse on what your people are writing in forums, or they're sending you through customer support emails, and have intelligent software that processes that text, breaks down the language structure, and actually spits out reports and dashboards to tell you what people are saying, what the sentiment is of those customers through text. And there's, if you think about Blizzard and their World of Warcraft forums, think of the millions and millions of posts there. If you were able to tap into all that data instead of hiring, an army of community managers to troll that and read it all themselves, if you had automated tools to process that and give you a report as to here's what people are squawking about, that to me would be very powerful technology. And there are some companies just starting to work on that, but it hasn't really been applied to this space yet.
Yeah, I agree with Tom. I have a friend actually is doing that, where they take 3 strings of words and anywhere on the net about your business, and they can kind of give you feedback, especially on what's going on how your brand is perceived. But very, like you said, it's not ubiquitous again.
We subscribe to Nielsen, and they do some buzz reporting that's helpful.
Yeah.
It's included one in this universe. Any final thoughts, Eric?
I don't think this would be controversial. I believe Zynga probably uses metrics probably deeper than most anybody in the online space. Maybe it is controversial, I don't know. But more than technology is, I'd like the culture to go even farther. I'd actually like everybody at Zynga to effortlessly have great tools and dashboards at their desk, no matter what their discipline was. I actually really want 3D artists to be able just to effortlessly scan through the marketplaces and just see what people are buying, so that the artist can look at it and go, wow, it turns out it's like hue saturation stuff, and purples and pinks are really selling a lot. I'm going to make some more purples and pinks, because they might have some insights on how to connect their craft to the data. It just will not happen if you rely on dedicated BI people. So I would like to get rid of dedicated BI people and just have everybody.
Yeah, and it takes some of the onus off everybody else, and from the education standpoint, and certainly more vested if they're the ones interfacing with the data, certainly.
So on our side, the piece of technology that I've always wanted, we're actually building right now, and we've talked about it, and it's kind of what Eric was talking about with engagement and creating hooks for players to be, for the experience to be more multiplayer. Well, essentially what we found is when you leave, you either leave in packs or you leave by yourself, and you basically lose all connection to anybody that's in the game. What we wanted, what I've always wanted, was kind of a system that allowed for those players to engage the community base even when they've left the game. So what we're trying to do right now is to build a social platform so that our players, even when they're not playing MapleStory or when they're not playing Combat Arms, can engage with their friends, which is what people do on Facebook all the time, is that they're already engaged with the community and now they're playing these games. We don't have that with our client-based games. Essentially, that I think is something that seems so simple, but is so powerful, is just maintaining those friendships. And we were inspired by that when we saw somebody on one of the MapleStory forums that had said that he had quit the game and was getting completely flamed by everybody there. And so we kind of went in and was like, okay, he really did quit the game, but he's in the forums so that he could hang out with the different players that he used to like hanging out with. And that was the only way that he could game it to do that. Why not offer that to your customers so that they can maintain their friendships and be longer lasting customers of your whole service and not just that one game?
Any final thoughts from anybody else before we open it up to questions from the audience?
Yeah, I know we didn't talk much about localization, but it's just, it comes up a lot. But the most important, thing that I've seen as far as launching products here from overseas has been just, brand affinity and trying to get more users to understand games that aren't actually created in the States, right? So it's, there's a lot of, difference there between games that might be very niche and companies that want to grow beyond what they can probably do in scale, based on the fact that they don't maybe understanding the market enough or localizing the product enough for it. So, the things that I've seen as far as how it looks or the feel or the gameplay is just not sometimes working. So you can pour a lot of people through the funnel, but it's just the product itself sometimes doesn't work. We'd like to come back to that.
I'd like to say I stress virality and acquisition through friends a lot, and that might sound cold and crass, but the other side of it, I'd like to say, the warm and fuzzy side is people want to play games with their friends. That's what they want to play with. And that's honestly why social games have taken off so much, is that they want to play with their friends. And I like the things of making communities or sticking with their friends. So it's not bad or wrong to connect people with their friends or have them play more often with their friends.
All right, we'll open it up to questions from the audience.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Ayo. I work for CCP. First, a small comment. We are using a third-party tool called Clara, C-L-A-R-A. It scrapes our forums, and we know within hours of publishing new content what the sentiment is. If you're interested, talk to me. So it's already out there. We're using it.
Plug.
Say again?
I said there's the plug.
There's the plug. Now, I got two questions for the panel. Number one, can you tell me a little bit about the technology that you're using in terms of acquiring and reporting data and doing the analysis? Are you using enterprise stuff like SAS? Are you using just regular Excel stuff? What kind of technology is behind
It's a loaded
your
question.
metrics?
Would any of you like to tackle it?
And can I add one to that? How current is the data that you're using today? And how current would you want it to be? Are you satisfied with the level of information you get today? Thank you.
I mean, we've been building all of our own stuff, and going to your question about how current, I think our data goes back just one day, maybe slightly less than a day, and I'm kind of okay with that, but that might be very different from other people's businesses, because again, my lifetimes for players are quite long, and I can make a judgment by looking at yesterday's data. Nexon don't for me, but that's kind of how we run it. We make most of our own stuff. We are evaluating a lot of things. I wish we can do more real-time polling. A lot of it really has been manual, based on our DB guys pulling stuff. And I think we can do it in much better ways, but can't really talk about what we're working on.
Zynga built its own stuff. Back at GoPets, I built my own stuff. I think there's an awful lot of value to building your own stuff. I would say that the danger when you pull an off-the-shelf BI system is you're outsourced and dependent, and you don't really grok it. So I think it's really worth building it at least once with your own dirty hands before you would buy something off the shelf. Zynga stuff is proprietary. It's supposed to be one of the biggest private databases in the world. I think we've talked about that. And we stream stuff in nearly real time. We use 5-minute bucket, so we know what happened 6 minutes ago.
We build most of our own stuff from the web perspective, I'm sure in Google, but depending on the report, we either get it hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly. And at any given time, I could have at the top of every hour 20 different reports, whether it be engagement, spending, acquisition. We have a lot of different reports for a lot of different uses, but they're for the most part in real time.
Yeah, I take it back. I mean, we do have real-time data, but I remember when I was first working with those tools, like, you get so addicted to it. You're looking at that data, you're just in front of that screen, like tapping and looking at it. And now I don't like doing that anymore because it kind of goes roughly the same way all the time, and you're just following this graph over and over again.
I'd be surprised. One thing I think I appreciate about working at Zynga is we really, really care about executional quality. We look at the hourly trends, like we look at Tuesday afternoons compared to last Tuesday afternoons. We look at that a lot. Because when things wiggle and get out of whack, I think a lot of people would just go, oh, that's random fluctuations. But Zynga's not satisfied with that answer. We always drill down and figure out what happened. And I'm convinced that has accumulated gains over time just to keep the product from accumulating small errors.
Yeah, we it's like, oh, why do we have that blip? And everybody's racking their head, and we're Korean companies, so like, we don't really understand U.S. holidays. Was there a holiday, or like, oh no, it was actually a snowstorm in New York, or something like that. And it gets pretty fun looking at that stuff. And I think it's fun, but it's also kind of addictive, and sometimes you get derailed. But I think it's really exciting and important to look at those things when you're doing important things like your content updates, or if somebody's messing with your network infrastructure, things like that. And that at those points is very, very important to be looking at those.
All right, it doesn't look like there's any more questions, and it's time. So thank you so much for your participation, and thank you.